welcome Professor Ravi Sarathy. We are going to discuss about cryptocurrencies, how it impacts India, how the Donald Trump's new law, the Genius Act, is going to impact the government in India, the financial sector in India, and also the ordinary common man in India. The most important thing is what is cryptocurrency before we move ahead. Is it possible for the Indian middle class to invest in cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, maybe 5% of their portfolio, maybe 10% of their portfolio without risking too much? So let us start with the ordinary consumer. Is it useful to them or not?
I don't want to be in a position of giving investment advice. So what I'll do is give you my opinions and people can interpret them. Bitcoin is somewhat speculative and very volatile. The price can go vary significantly in the short term. And same is true for Ethereum, Solana, Link, etc., all of the major cryptocurrencies. Whereas stable coins are by nature intended to be stable, that is, maintain parity, one-to-one relationship with the underlying fiat currency, whether it is the US dollar, the euro, the Chinese yuan, the Indian rupee, etc. Right? So if I'm an investor, I really have to think about my particular position, my context, how much assets I have, what will be the need I'll have for my assets, paying my children's fees, or saving for a wedding, or buying for a property, or taking care of my parents' health needs, etc. So each individual will be somewhat different. But depending on that, they can decide what portion of their assets they can put into what I would call the speculative bucket, where the appreciation can be high, but the risk is also high. And a speculative bucket should never be a significant portion of a portfolio. The average person might decide, depending on the stage of life and circumstances, to have 20, 30% of their assets in a speculative bucket and the rest in somewhat more liquid, more conservative, safer investments. Again, it depends on the individual, their family situation, etc. Having said that, within that 20, 30% speculative bucket, you can certainly take some portion of it, maybe 10% of that speculative bucket, and put it into cryptocurrency. So essentially what I'm saying is 3 to 5% is probably the most I would recommend for my own personal needs, as well as for my friends or family. I have to say, really depends on your circumstances, but there are many speculative investments out there. Technology companies, derivatives, options, foreign exchange trading. So it's really up to you how much of your total assets you want to invest in speculation. And within that speculative bucket, you may choose to put some money into cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin. Now, having said that, I'll also point out that long term, over the last 15 years, Bitcoin has done very well. It is now around 120,000. And so if you bought it in 2011 or 12, very few people did. But if you were one of those very early investors, you'd have made a lot of money. And so time horizon also matters. If you buy cryptocurrency, you should walk into it knowing that you might lose some of the money, particularly in the short term. But it is possible that if you're patient and can afford to buy and hold for 5-10 years, that it'll probably turn out to be a reasonably profitable investment.
That's a very good advice. So, audience, the good advice coming from Professor Sarathy is that 3 to 5% of your total portfolio could go in a speculative assets like the cryptocurrency. And one of them is Bitcoin, but there are other cryptocurrencies as well. Let me now tell you, where does Professor Ravi Sarathy come from? He is a professor of business and strategy at the Northeastern University in Boston. He started his educational journey with at IIM in Ahmedabad, Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. He studied in Bombay. He is from Chennai, but lived most of the early years of his life in Bombay. and now he is in the US. He has written a book on blockchain. So he is in some ways an expert on the subject we are discussing, and you can trust him with his advice. I can see he's also very cautious about his advice, so that is very good. He's not taking chances. Uh, Now, with the Genius Act, Professor Sarathi, we have a new situation. We have a situation where the US government is actively encouraging the growth of stable coins. So at this stage, we have to understand what is a stable coin and what is the other speculative currencies like Bitcoin. What is the basic difference?
Well, Bitcoin, for example, has gone up and down quite significantly. In about a year ago, it was probably around $50,000. Today, it's 120,000. And if you look at the history of Bitcoin, it has usually had peaks and then fairly significant declines. And this has happened many times over the life of Bitcoin from 2009. Stablecoins, on the other hand, are designed to offer the benefits of a digital currency. See, one of the nice things about a digital currency like Bitcoin is it is peer-to-peer. So I don't have to involve a bank or any intermediary. I can send the funds directly from my account to the recipient's account. As long as the two of us have what are called digital wallets, and as long as each of us has a private key and a public key. So it's a little bit of a learning curve. There's some onboarding that is required. But if you set that up correctly, you can easily do peer-to-peer transfers. Secondly, it is instantaneous. And third, it is almost zero cost, very, very low cost. And it is semi-anonymous. It is not completely anonymous because you have to create a digital wallet, and depending upon the legal situation and the ability of the investigative services, etc., they can find out ultimately who owns the account. But ultimately, that's only a few people. So generally speaking, you have a degree of anonymity, and it is also usually registered on a blockchain, which means that the record is permanent and immutable, which means it cannot be erased. And if you try to tamper with it, the way blockchain is set up underlying Bitcoin, it is tamper evident. So you can immediately find out if somebody tried to change a transaction within the blockchain underlying Bitcoin. And Bitcoin has been around since 2009. It has never been hacked. Whereas the digital wallets can be hacked. So if I own a Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency, I put it in a digital wallet. And if I'm not careful with my private key, it can be hacked. Or if I'm giving custody of my digital wallet to an exchange, that exchange can be hacked. And it has happened in the past. Okay? So Bitcoin is somewhat complex to use and is volatile. The stablecoin idea is that I will try to get the benefits of a digital currency, namely instant transfer, low cost, peer-to-peer transfers, etc. But I'll do it without the volatility. Now, how do you do that? The answer is that I can take very liquid, safe reserves, such as in the US Treasury bills and US dollars, put them into a segregated account that I'm not supposed to use for my own personal business activities, segregate that. So if, let's say I have put $10 million into a segregated account, then I can issue the equivalent amount of stablecoins. I can issue 10 million stablecoins on a one-to-one basis with the $10 million that I have set aside in a kind of vault, in a safe location that I cannot, take out of. Now, as long as the reserves are safe, that is, they don't vary in price, and as long as they're segregated so that I'm guaranteed that the dollars that I have put in the reserve are at least equivalent to, if not greater than the total amount of stable coins I'm issuing, then it is fine. And that is exactly what the Genius Act is proposing. It says we want to regulate the amount of stable coins that are being issued by making clear that the reserves must be held in safe assets, and they must be held in a certain location, meaning segregated from the company's activities, and they must be audited on a regular basis so that we can prove that the underlying reserves exist and can back the stablecoin. So that if at some point somebody wants to exchange the stablecoin back for the underlying fiat currency, then they can be sure of doing so because there are enough reserves out there.
So
So
you are
that in a
basically
nutshell.
You are basically saying that it is much safer than Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. But where is the income? Is there a profit to be made by investing in it?
Not really. If I own a stable coin, the only way I can make a profit is interest. And really depends upon the stablecoin regulations. Some stablecoin issuers may give you interest on that stablecoin deposit, others may not. And the US Genius Act doesn't really state that interest needs to be paid. Now, what I can do is buy a stablecoin and then put it into an exchange and allow the exchange to lend against that stable coin, acting like a bank. Because remember, the way banks work, I open a bank account, I put my money in there, and then the bank lends that money, actually more than the account, through fractional reserve banking to other clients, earns interest on that account, and then pays me some portion of that interest. So stable coins could be used by the stablecoin issuer as the basis for lending. But I personally, the only way I could earn a return on my stablecoin is if I'm offered some interest by the stablecoin issuer or by the exchange where I store my stablecoin. So, in general, I would say that a bank account, a savings account, you know that you'll get interest. Whereas with the stablecoin, it is not as clear whether I'm going to earn interest. So you might ask, why own stablecoin? And the biggest answer to me is that it gives you the convenience of being able to transact digitally without the volatility of a Bitcoin. And secondly, that it allows people all over the world to own dollars without actually owning, the banknotes or having an account in an overseas bank. It's much easier to own a stablecoin, I think, than it is to open a US bank account or to buy US dollars and keep it in your safe in your house, something like that. And if you think about countries like India, where the Indian rupee has depreciated over time, we all know that many people own some US dollars. And so similarly, you might say it's easier, more portable to own US dollar stablecoins.
But there is some advice being given that if you have a Bitcoin, you can go to your bank, use it as a pledge, and get loan and buy more Bitcoins. Is this sensible? Is this good advice?
It is building speculation on top of speculation.
Yes.
You see, so you're becoming more risky. Obviously, there are people who are able to withstand that kind of speculative loss if it occurs. But for most people, the stablecoin is primarily a means of storing money and a means of exchanging digital payments. Because a merchant can accept a stablecoin more easily than accept Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency.